Han Sen remained still, watching the unicorn beetle made of green crystal climbing out of the gaps made by Li Mingtong's grenade. The unicorn beetle was the size of a fist. It did not climb fast, and the gap was not wide. It took the beetle some effort to climb to the ground. Compared with the golden Rubik's Cube and simulating crystals, this unicorn beetle was obviously quite clumsy. It was climbing slowly, and it seemed it could not fly either. After climbing for a short distance, the horn of the beetle clashed with a statue. The little thing was so dumb that it did not even know how to turn. Struggling with its feet, it tried to move forward. However, its strength was obviously minimal so that it could not move the statue at all. The beetle looked like a toy car going around in circles. After some observation, Han Sen found that this guy was both dumb and weak. It could not be compared to the golden Rubik's Cube at all, and did not seem that dangerous. Han Sen thought about it and climbed out of the ear of the statue, throwing a crystal near the unicorn beetle. Startled by the sound, the unicorn beetle forgot about the statue it was trying to move, turned around and climbed toward the crystal that had fallen. Shortly, it touched the crystal, which was only slightly bigger than a fist. Using its horn to leverage the crystal, the unicorn beetle only managed to shake the crystal slightly and failed to move it away. Among the stuff manufactured by crystallizers, there is something so useless? Han Sen was surprised. He walked over to the unicorn beetle, grabbed its shell, and lifted it up. Like a turtle that was lying on its back, the unicorn beetle moved its feet around yet failed to touch anything. It was indeed very weak and could not get out of Han Sen's hand. This must be a pet made by crystallizers? Han Sen examined the beetle carefully. This pet was carved with the mysterious patterns of crystallizers, similar to the ones on the black crystal gate, looking like the guts of a mechanical watch. Han Sen touched the feet of the unicorn beetle with his finger, which was grabbed by the beetle immediately. However, it did not have much force. Grabbing Han Sen's finger, the unicorn beetle came to the back of his hand. Holding Han Sen's wrist, the beetle chirped at Han Sen twice. Han Sen saw that the beetle was completely useless, so he left it alone and walked to the gaps made by the grenade explosion. Li Mingtong's grenade must be specially made. It broke the crystal floor and made a foot-long crack. Han Sen looked down the crack and was pleasantly surprised. It was an oval chamber down the crack, with a dozen purple crystals inside it. Han Sen had seen this type of crystals before, which was the one that Ji Yanran had used on him, the crystal that could enhance brain development. Han Sen wanted to go down for those crystals, but he had no tools on him. This was, after all, just a doppelganger. Afraid that the doppelganger would be destroyed by the researchers, Han Sen did not leave any beast souls with it in the first place. With the strength of the beetle knight, it was not realistic for him to widen the crack. Han Sen had to stay put and wait for his own body and Ji Yanran to come over. At that time, he would think of some ways to take the crystals out from the chamber underneath. His own body and Ji Yanran were still a bit far away from his doppelganger. So Han Sen, the doppelganger, sat down and started to play with the unicorn beetle on his hand. This guy looked quite pretty yet incredibly clumsy. It was quite fun to play with it. Han Sen and Ji Yanran followed the doppelganger's route. Han Sen told Ji Yanran about what had happened and took her over. He also described the looks of the unicorn beetle to Ji Yanran, but she did not know what it was either. Her guess was also that it can be a crystallizer's toy or something like that. After seeing his doppelganger, Han Sen seized the unicorn beetle and took the beetle knight back to his mind. Products of crystallizers generally have some unique functions. The golden Rubik's Cube you just described was in fact a guard crystal. It could shoot lightsabers that easily slice warframes apart, let alone human bodies. Unless someone was fast enough to escape before it started to use lightsabers, there was no other way to go past it. Seemingly useless stuff like this is indeed quite rare in crystallizer ruins. Ji Yanran observed the unicorn beetle and did not see anything special about it. It is a crystallizer product after all. Even if it is a toy, it is quite unique. I believe I can make some money if I take it back. Looking at the unicorn beetle, all Han Sen could see was dollars. Many collectors are very into crystallizer products. If you find the right person, it could be worth a lot. Ji Yanran nodded and said, "Then I will keep it first." Han Sen put the unicorn beetle into a pocket and walked over to the gap. He then turned on his super biological warframe to widen the gap. After 20+ minutes, the gap was wide enough for a person to go down, so Han Sen put away the warframe and crawled inside. There was no other things in the room than the purple crystals. Han Sen picked them up one by one and counted 16 in excitement. Ji Yanran told him before that although the crystals called brain crystals by human could be spotted in a lot of crystallizer ruins, the number was not huge. In smaller ruins, it would be lucky to find 1 or 2 brain crystals. Sometimes there was none. Even in larger ruins, it would be impressive to find 7 to 8 brain crystals. Human history, the most brain crystals they ever found in a ruin were 100+, which shocked the entire alliance. The fact that there were 16 brain crystals in this place was definitely something huge. If you want to take these brain crystals for yourself, you will have to use them right here. Otherwise, they would be spotted in the scanning process before you board Daphne, Ji Yanran told Han Sen, seeing how excited her boyfriend was. Then let's use them. We will each use half. For better, for worse. Han Sen said and split the brain crystals into 2 portions, taking 8 for himself and giving 8 to Ji Yanran. Initially, Ji Yanran did not plan to take the crystals. Listening to Han Sen, she was happy to take the 8 crystals and said, "We could only use 1 in 12 hours, otherwise the extra stimulation to the brains would cause a small problem." Han Sen nodded and put a brain crystal on his forehead. Suddenly, he felt an electric current flowing into his brain and the brain crystal broke. Feeling the numbness in his brain, Han Sen was alerted by the coolness from his pituitary, making his brain clearer than ever. Brain crystals are indeed fantastic stuff. Unfortunately, its effect will fade gradually. In the end, the brain will only be developed slightly. Han Sen put away the rest of the brain crystals and looked to the triangular exit in the center of the room. The space inside the room was spherical. Other than the gap where they came from, the only exit was the triangular tunnel leading downward in the center of the room. Han Sen walked to the tunnel and looked down, finding the 6-foot-long tunnel was connected to another spherical room. Ji Yanran, do you know what these spherical rooms are used for? Han Sen knew so little about crystallizers that he had to look to Ji Yanran. Ji Yanran shook her head and said, "In all the materials that I've studied, there is no mentioning of such places. However, there are many unsolved mysteries in crystallizer civilization, so this is normal. Shall we go down and have a look? Maybe there are more brain crystals." Han Sen thought about it and said. Li Mingtang and Wang Ho had entered the core area. However, the guard crystal had followed them inside. Han Sen had no idea what was happening in the core area, so they might encounter the guard crystal if they followed Li Mingtang and Wang Ho, which was not ideal. "I wonder if it's too risky," Ji Yanran hesitated. "It's not risky." Han Sen summoned Snow Charmer and sent her down the triangular tunnel to find out what was inside the other room. Very soon, Han Sen made sure that it was an empty room. Snow Charmer also found triangular tunnels leading to other places. Han Sen hesitated and summoned the Beetle Knight again, making his doppelganger hide inside the statue's ear, watching the entrance from which Li Mingtang and the rest entered the core area, while he and Ji Yanran entered the other room through the triangular tunnel. Like Snow Charmer said, it was an empty room. On the side of the room, there was a triangular tunnel of the same size leading horizontally to another spherical room. Han Sen asked Snow Charmer to climb into the tunnel, first to make sure there was no danger before he and Ji Yanran went inside one by one. It turned out that all the spherical rooms were empty, all connected by triangular tunnels. After traveling past a dozen spherical rooms, Ji Yanran and Han Sen ended up in a normal room. Walls of the room there were lined with black crystal cabinets that had at least hundreds of lockers. There was no telling what was inside. "This is the treasure." Ji Yanran saw the black crystal cabinets and became surprised. "You're saying this is the treasure?" So, the simulating crystals, parasite crystals, and guard crystals are all stored here. Han Sen was overjoyed. He did not expect to come to the treasure by accident. These black crystal cabinets are similar to the ones used to store crystals that we had discovered before. However, this room is different from the previous treasure. Also, I'm not sure why the room is connected with those spherical rooms. Therefore, I could not make sure whether this is the real treasure. Ji Yanran was not confident. "Let's open one up to find out." Han Sen asked Ji Yanran to go back into the previous spherical room and commanded Snow Charmer to open up a square black crystal coker. Nothing strange happened. The black crystal locker was empty. There was nothing stored inside. Ji Yanran came back to examine the inner structure of the cabinet and said assertively, "Now I am sure that this is the cabinet that holds the crystals. This should be a treasure, but it seems too small for a royalty ruin. These cabinets could not even be compared to those in some smaller ruins. It does not look like it is designed for a royalty. It's good as long as it is a treasure. Maybe it is the private collection of the royalty." Han Sen was excited and asked Snow Charmer to open up other cabinets. However, dozens of cabinets all turned out to be empty, which disappointed Han Sen a bit. However, Han Sen did not want to accept zero gains, so he commanded Snow Charmer to open up all the cabinets. After she had opened 80+ cabinets, she finally saw a twinkling light inside. Han Sen was excited and quickly walked up to the cabinet. There was a golden crystal inside the size of a snail. It was over with a complicated cut, which made it look like a brilliant golden diamond. "It is a crystal?" Han Sen did not dare to move and asked Ji Yanran. Ji Yanran nodded and said, "This is an inactive crystal. Judging from the look of it, it should be the Rubik's Cube that you had seen. It will not turn itself on, right?" Han Sen was startled. Ji Yanran shook her head and smiled. "Definitely not. All the crystals stored in the treasure are dormant until they are activated by crystallizers. However, it is impossible to find a living crystallizer to initiate these crystals. The guard crystals are commonly seen, but normal ruins only have 2x2 or 3x3 Rubik's Cubes. Even in larger ruins, the Rubik's Cubes are mostly 6x6. The 12x12 Rubik's Cube you saw is very rare and of high value for collection and research. If this is also a 12x12 Rubik's Cube, then it is priceless." Hearing Ji Yanran say that, Han Sen was overjoyed, took out the golden crystal, and stuffed it in his pocket. He said with a smile, "Then I will put it away first." Ji Yanran knew what he was thinking but did not say anything, just rolling her eyes at him. With the finding of the guard crystal, Han Sen was even more motivated. He told Snow Charmer to open up all the remaining cabinets and soon discovered another crystal. It was a white crystal. Han Sen looked to his girlfriend, puzzled. This is the memory crystal, containing all the data left by the crystallizers. If one has enough mental power, one could directly sense the content of the crystal. However, humans nowadays could hardly reach that level. They could only get part of the fragmented information in the crystal relying on machines. Since this crystal is left behind by a crystallizer royalty, it might contain important information. If we are all able to translate part of it, maybe our science and technology could have another leap, Ji Yanran explained. "Then I will put it away first." Han Sen unapologetically took this memory crystal as well. "Did you hear something?" Han Sen suddenly noticed something and looked to Ji Yanran. Ji Yanran shook her head and said, "What did you hear?" As Han Sen was about to say something, he suddenly heard something falling. Pink crystals as big as duck eggs started to fall from the triangular tunnel from which they came down. Momentarily, there were 100+ pink crystals present. Parasite crystals. Both Ji Yanran and Han Sen exclaimed at the same time. Oval parasite crystals threw themselves at Ji Yanran and Han Sen like bouncing balls in increasing numbers, making the couple cringe. "Run!" Without any hesitation, Han Sen took Ji Yanran's hand to run toward the exit of the treasure. Although parasite crystals could be crushed, there were so many of them that even Han Sen could not fend them all off since they would grow on human body as long as they touched the skin. The couple rushed out of the treasure and ran for their life in the tunnel that was slightly taller than a person. Countless parasite crystals followed them like ocean waves and filled their sight. The pink crystals were incredibly fast as well. Damn it! Where do these parasite crystals come from? How come we did not see them when we entered the place? Han Sen was slightly upset. They were right inside the core area of the crystallizer royalty ruin, running recklessly. If they died here, they would not even know what killed them. However, looking at the endless parasite crystals following them, Han Sen knew they would die definitely if they did not run, so he did not dare to stop. Luckily, the snow-toothed wolf mounts was running ahead of them as their scout, which was more or less a comfort to Han Sen. Boom! The snow-toothed wolf, which was running in front, was suddenly cut in half by a beam of light. It fell heavily on the floor and then disappeared. Rubik's Cube. Han Sen saw the 12 by 12 Rubik's Cube in the next intersection and became pale. This way. Ji Yanran ran into a side path first and Han Sen followed her. However, neither the parasite crystals nor the Rubik's Cube was retreating. Both of them followed the couple. Ji Yanran and Han Sen ran around several corners and suddenly found themselves in a dead end. There was no way to go. Whatever. Han Sen knew it was time to fight for his life. He drew his laser gun and shot at the incoming parasite crystals like crazy. Ji Yanran did exactly the same, shooting at the parasite crystals with her laser gun non-stop. However, the guns were not that useful. After breaking several parasite crystals, more started to go at them. There was simply no end to the crystals. Very soon, a large number of parasite crystals had come close to them and tried to attach to their bodies. Han Sen gritted his teeth and threw a grenade before he covered Ji Yanran to hide in the corner. The grenade exploded in the tunnel, smashing lots of parasite crystals. However, Han Sen was only using an ordinary grenade. The crystal wall and floor quickly expanded under the impact like foam, filling up the entire tunnel and almost drowning Han Sen and Ji Yanran. "Are you okay?" Han Sen tried to move his body, but he was trapped in crystals that were still expanding because of the explosion, which made it hard for him to even turn around. The couple were trapped in a narrow space, so they had to stand hugging each other. There was no additional space at all. "Infine." Ji Yanran answered in a soft voice, her cheek on Han Sen's chest and her body pressed to his body. Although Han Sen enjoyed making out with Ji Yanran, it was obviously more important to run for their lives. The entire tunnel was filled up by the expanding crystals, so there was no way to go out from the way they came from. The only possible exit would be the space behind the dead end, if there were any. As long as they could break this crystal wall, they would still have hope. However, Han Sen no longer had any beast soul weapon he could use. He had to run Jade Skin and turn his hands into Jade, throwing punches at the crystal wall behind Ji Yanran's back. Bang! Under Han Sen's fist, the wall only had a hairline crack. "I have a sacred blood dagger from Second God's sanctuary. Let me try," Ji Yanran said and summoned her dagger, stabbing at the wall behind her backward. However, Ji Yanran could hardly move her arm, so it was hard for her to put much force into the move. In addition, she had just become an evolver before long, so she did not have great fitness. After stabbing with her dagger a few times, she was only able to leave several shallow white marks on the crystal wall. "I'll do it." Han Sen stopped Ji Yanran and punched at the crystal wall again. Han Sen had achieved initial success in Yin Yang Blast. Using the technique of Yin Force, it was not hard for him to make a powerful punch in a short distance. With slight vibration, Han Sen's fist punched at the crystal wall with loud bangs. After dozens of punches, the crystal finally cracked. Pieces of crystals started to fall from the crystal wall. Han Sen followed up by punching hundreds of times, expanding the cracks. Eventually, the crystal wall was pierced by his fist. "I know that God will not let me die here." Han Sen was overjoyed. The crystal wall was only less than an inch thick. He accelerated in punching the wall and quickly expanded the opening to the size that one person could cross through. "Turn around slowly and crawl into the hole." Han Sen glanced into the hole and saw a hall. There did not seem to be much stuff inside. In addition, if there was anything inside, it must have been alerted by the loud noises he was making. Ji Yanran turned around slowly. However, looking at the hole, her eyes suddenly became red.
She cried, "Han Sen."
She sounded like she was crying. Tears filled up her eyes, and she grabbed Han Sen's hands. The crystal next to the hole was colored red by blood, which was astonishing to look at. And the back of Han Sen's hands was completely broken. Breaking the crystal wall with bare hands was something difficult for him, even though he had practiced Jade Skin. In the end, her bones were almost broken. However, Han Sen gritted his teeth and pulled through without making a sound, which was why Ji Yanran only noticed his wound until this point. Holding Han Sen's hand, Ji Yanran could not make a complete sentence. Her tears fell like rain.
"No worries."
"It's a small injury." My bones are good. Let's go out first. Han Sen smiled and urged Ji Yanran to crawl into the hole. Han Sen followed her inside and was astonished by what he saw. The hall was the size of a factory workshop. It was empty inside, but on the ceiling of the hall, red crystals were floating like red stars, blinking with red light. Han Sen recognized this type of crystal immediately, which was the simulating crystal. Boom! When the couple just stood up, all the simulating crystals started to flash red lights at them, as if there was a press conference in the hall. Shortly, red crystal humans that looked exactly like Han Sen or Ji Yanran fell from the ceiling and ran toward them. Simulating crystals were an impressive creation, which many human scholars called a miracle. It was impossible for a human to become a rock, let alone a gun. However, simulating crystals were beyond their limitations. As crystals, simulating crystals could mimic the characteristics of different matters, which was miraculous and amazing. When turning into mechanics, the simulating crystals were like machines. However, when turning into creatures, they had the features of creatures. In addition, simulating crystals' abilities were similar to the simulated items. As miraculous as it was, the simulating crystal had a fatal flaw, which was that the stronger its target was, the stronger it would be. That meant if the target was not strong enough, the crystals would be weak. Of course, because of the material itself, the simulating crystals would not be too weak. If it was simulating an ant, because of the toughness of the crystal, it was still 1,000 times stronger than an ordinary ant. Currently, the simulating crystals became Han Sen and Ji Yanran. In fact, they acquired the data of their bodies by scanning them. Data could be imitated, but there were certain things that simulating crystals could not imitate, such as the martial arts they practiced and their understanding of those martial arts. Therefore, when Han Sen saw a large number of simulating crystals turning into Ji Yanran and him, he was not too appalled but became more relaxed. If the simulating crystals became warframes or weapons, even if they could dodge the attack, the crystals around them would expand under the impact of explosion and bury Ji Yanran and him alive. At this point, simulating crystals turned to Ji Yanran and Han Sen knew absolutely everything about his own body. Ji Yanran was a weak evolver. That was why Han Sen thought it was the best consequence. Ji Yanran, on the other hand, was scared and became pale. Just out of a trap, they were trapped in a bigger crisis. It would not work if they blew up the tunnel again. If they blew up another tunnel, they might be trapped here for good without any possibilities to escape. Protect yourself. Han Sen pulled Ji Yanran behind his back and rushed out. Shortly, Ji Yanran stared her eyes wide, and her jaw dropped. Han Sen threw himself at the group of red crystal humans and beheaded one of them with bare hands. He threw the crystal head on the face of the next red crystal human and smashed its chest with his knee. The entire process was so smooth and unexpected that it was wonderful to watch. As many as the simulating crystals were, all of them were broken up by Han Senator. The red crystal humans did not have any power to fight back, as if they were dogs in front of Han Sen. Ji Yanran did not believe that the rest crystal humans were too weak. After all, the simulating crystals imitated Han Sen and herself. Those looking like her notwithstanding, the ones that looked like Han Sen should theoretically have the same physical abilities as him. The only explanation for such a huge gap in strength was that Han Sen used his own force very effectively. Having the same force, different people would have different applications. It was the same as playing chess. Although all the players had the same number of pieces, an advanced player would play very differently from a beginner. Without a doubt, the percentage of force Han Sen could tap into made him a super master, which was why the red crystal humans looked like him but could not fight back at all. With Ji Yanran's background, she had seen a lot of talents, including quite a few surpassers, and demigods were nothing rare in her eyes. However, in terms of the effectiveness of using the force, Han Sen was definitely among the top 5 in evolvers. In addition, those evolvers were all celebrities and progenies in the Alliance, with great background and reputation. Ji Yanran had only seen one person with a humble background who could achieve this level, which was Han Sen. Ji Yanran was completely impressed by Han Sen's moves and became very proud of both Han Sen and her choice. With her family and status, it was easy for her to choose any talented young man. But she chose Han Sen and did not second-guess herself even during the period of time when Han Sen was missing. Although her choice was mostly out of sentimental reasons, she was very happy with Han Sen's performance. There was no lady in the world who did not wish her man was the best, and Ji Yanran was no exception. Boom, boom, boom. Broken red crystals fell all over the floor, turned into red liquid and evaporated. Han Sen made a solid punch each time and blew up hundreds of red crystal humans. Boom! He used 7 kill to turn his leg into axes, kicking the head of a red crystal man into its guts, blowing up its entire body. Pieces of crystal fell on the floor. Han Sr. Ji Yanran blushed out of excitement and hugged her man, not knowing what to say. She felt as long as she was around Han Sen, she had nothing to fear and nothing to worry about. Han Sen thought Ji Yanran was worried about him, patted her on her bouncy butts and smiled. Just a few red crystal men. It's going to take way more than that to hurt your husband.
No worries.
Ji Yanran hugged him tight without speaking or letting go, burying her head in his chest. Ahem, this is not the right time. Even if you're in the mood, we must find somewhere safe first. Seeing how charming and tempting Ji Yanran was, Han Sen was burning up with passion. I'm in no mood. Ji Yanran blushed and hit Han Sen with her small fist, rolling her eyes at him. Isn't it nice to be young? You have the mood to flirt in such a place. A voice sounded with the worst timing, surprising Han Sen and Ji Yanran. They quickly turned to look. The crystal door on the side of the hall was pushed open. Li Mingtang entered from outside, looking at the couple with a grin. Han Sen looked behind him and did not see Wang Ho. Li Mingtang was injured in multiple places and did not seem to be in good shape.
Han Sen, you surprise me.
I have only seen 3 people at your age who could use their own strength so effectively. Li Mingtang looked at Han Sen with approval and continued to say, however, this is in a crystallizer royalty ruin. So, from now on, you have to follow my lead. And why is that? Han Sen stared at Li Mingtang coldly and said, for this, what do you think? Li Mingtang said casually, and his skin suddenly turned into gold. Instantaneously, he had a gold body, looking like the Buddha himself. Super Diamond Body. You obtained Super Diamond Body. Han Sen was shocked, watching Li Mingtang with a golden body. I started when I was 3 years old and had spent more than 6 decades practicing it. All I have achieved is initial success. Li Mingtang said quietly, without any intention to brag. What is Super Diamond Body?
Han Sen asked, Putzled.
The name sounds like some cheeky cartoon he used to watch on the Skynet. Ji Yanran explained, there are numerous hyper-geno arts adapted from ancient martial arts, so there are all kinds of rankings. However, no matter which ranking you see, Super Diamond Body is always in the top 10. Super Diamond Body was adapted from the ancient martial art Indestructible Diamond Body. If you could practice it to the extreme, even plasma cannons could not hurt you. However, it is so hard to practice that 100 years might be just a start. Therefore, not a lot of people dare to try this hyper-geno art. However, once achieving something, one's body would be absolutely peerless among people with the same status. It is not that impressive as the captain said. I have only achieved initial success. If someone has a fitness level above 120, it would be easy for him to break up my body. Li Mingting paused and said, in fact, you do not need to be my enemies. I did not mean to take your lives anyway, otherwise, Captain, you will not be able to live until this moment. In this crystallizer king ruin full of crises, an extra person means extra force. We should all cooperate in order to have a bigger chance at survival. What do you think? Cooperation, yes. However, you must at least tell us about your goal to enter this crystallizer royalty ruin. We do not want to die without knowing why. After consulting his girlfriend, Han Sen said to Li Mingtang, in fact, it will do you no good knowing about these. You'd be better off not know.
Li Mingtang siga.
Since you want to cooperate with us, you must have something you need us for. If we follow you without asking, we would probably die without knowing the reason, Han Sen said coldly. You are indeed smart people. Li Mingtang paused and continued, actually, I could tell you and it's fine. Captain, you should know that this crystallizer ruin was discovered decades ago. I heard that an interstellar exploration ship found this place. Ji Yanran thought about it and said. Li Mingtang nodded slightly and said, "Indeed. The exploration ship found this crystallizer royalty ruin and sent a team to explore it. However, none of them came back. After that, the Alliance sent a warship similar to Daphne here, and none of the people came back alive either." "Did you know what had happened?" Ji Yanran said. "No." Li Mingtang shook his head and said with his eyes glistening, "However, my late father was the captain of the exploration ship that discovered the ruin in the first place. After he came here, he never went back. All I want to find is his remains." "Professor, you must think we are 3-year-olds? It is so obvious that you and Wang Ho both want something here. Don't tell me that Wang Ho is also looking for his dad's remains," Han Sen said quietly. Li Mingtang smiled and said, "Of course, the reason we entered the ruin was also for something the captain of the Alliance warship brought to the ruin." "What is it?"
Han Sen asked.
"A crystallizer key. Legend has it that as long as you have that key, you could initiate the core of crystallizer ruins and control all the crystals." Li Mingtang was full of excitement. Can you imagine what would happen if humans could control those magnificent crystallizer technologies? It will make human technology jump ahead 300 years. "I'm afraid that the reason you're looking for that crystallizer key is not to enhance human technologies," Han Sen said coldly. Han Sen knew that the so-called exploration ship was actually pirate ships which grabbed the fortunes in the universe that had been overlooked. For Li Mingtang's father, the captain of an exploration ship was a euphemism of interstellar pirate. "I've told you everything you want to know. Choose whether or not you want to cooperate with me." Li Mingtang did not answer Han Sen's question, but said to the couple, "One last question. What do you need us for?"
Han Sen asked.
"There is an area ahead of us that neither Wang Ho nor I managed to go through. We also lost each other. Unexpectedly, I ran into you guys. I now have an idea. The 3 of us work together to pass that area to reach the core of the crystallizer ruin. When we arrive there, you could take the crystals and the treasure, which are what the Alliance wants anyways. And I could take the crystallizer key. What do you think?" Li Mingtang said, "Deal." Han Sen had decided on the reply with Ji Yanran minutes ago, so he agreed without hesitation. "Okay, let's go then. When we are in the area, I will then tell you in details what to do. We should not mess around with this, otherwise all 3 of us will be in danger," Li Mingtang said and walked out of the hall. Han Sen followed Li Mingtang, holding Ji Yanran's hand. Looking around, he couldn't help praising the greatness of crystallizer civilization. Even now, the Alliance could hardly build such an integrated architecture covering the entire planet without affecting the planet's self-regulating system, which was simply magnificent. Li Mingtang carefully led the way ahead of them, telling them what to watch out for, so that they would not trigger the self-defense mechanism in the ruin. Shortly, the 3 of them reached an abyss, which looked bottomless and was about several miles wide. It almost looked like the gates to hell. From afar, he could see a fairy-tale-like castle that looked like it was designed for the giants. The castle was connected to their side by a foot-long crystal bridge. It looked like the 2 sides of the abscess were connected by a thread. Passing this crystal bridge, we could then arrive at the core of the crystallizer royalty ruin, Li Mingtang said, pointing at the castle far away. "Can we fly over?"
Han Sen sighed. "Put sled."
"Look above," Li Mingtang pointed to the ceiling and said. The couple looked above and saw gigantic green crystals were hanging from the ceiling like chandeliers, each over 10 feet wide and very delicate. As gorgeous as they were, Ji Yanran became pale after she saw them. After seeing those green crystals, Ji Yanran started to whisper, "There are nest crystals here. How can we possibly walk over there?" Ji Yanran asked Li Mingtang. "That is why we need to work together," Li Mingtang said. Han Sen did not know what the green crystals were for, so he did not speak but listened. After a while, he finally understood why Li Mingtang and Wang Ho failed to go through. The green crystals that looked like chandeliers were named nest crystals, nurturing lots of mini crystals inside of them. The nest crystals were very sensitive to air circulation. Once air circulated around them, the mini crystals inside would jet out like hail. However, those mini crystals were 1,000 times scarier than hail. Full of spikes, they would start to absorb blood once they touched human skin. Even with super diamond body, Li Mingtang could not block the mini crystals, so it was definitely not easy to go through. Using flying beast souls to fly across would definitely trigger the nest crystals. The only possible way was to walk slowly over the crystal bridge to reduce the air circulation, so that the nests would not be triggered. The trouble was that even though they could walk on the bridge, that would still generate movements and air circulation, which would still trigger nests. If the nest crystals were triggered, the three persons must work together to avoid being touched by the mini crystals. Li Mingtang told Ji Yanran and Han Sen how to cope with the mini crystals, and the three of them slowly walked onto the crystal bridge with some distance apart. None of them dared to go too fast. They moved on the bridge like slow motion for fear that they might alert the nest crystals. Initially, Li Mingtang thought that it was basically impossible to walk through without triggering the crystals. However, the three of them passed the bridge slowly. The nest crystals hanging above were not triggered at all. Strange. Even Li Mingtang frowned, not knowing why the nest crystals were so calm. Last time when Li Mingtang came to this place with Wang Ho, they triggered a nest crystal without walking far. In the end, the two of them had to run for their lives separately. Even so, Li Mingtang still got injured. It is the best if we could refrain from triggering them. Let's go inside, Li Mingtang said, and walked into the castle. Ji Yanran and Han Sen followed up, maintaining some distance from Li Mingtang. Previously, Li Mingtang needed them to go over the bridge. However, now that the nest crystals were not triggered, Li Mingtang might not need them anymore. Han Sen vigilantly followed Li Mingtang into the castle. The gate was already open. After they entered the castle, they became dumbstruck. In the huge castle lay many corpses in a messy way. All the corpses looked alive without any hint of drying up. They almost looked like living persons. However, taking a closer look at them, the three could easily tell that they were dead. When seeing those dead people, Li Mingtang suddenly became excited. Quickly glancing at the dead bodies, his eyes fell on the body of a middle-aged man and he became thrilled. Although Li Mingtang was overjoyed, he did not dare to go over, observing vigilantly. Those people would not die here for no reason. There were no injuries on any of their bodies. Standing or sitting, they simply died, without any traces of fighting or struggling. However, Li Mingtang still did not understand how those people died and why their bodies looked exactly like how they were when alive, without any signs of corruption, which was why he did not dare to go over. Han Sen and Ji Yanran were even less tempted to go up. When they were about to ask Li Mingtang the expert, they suddenly saw someone coming out from a structure inside the castle. With a closer look, Li Mingtang saw it was Wang Ho and suddenly changed his looks. He asked Wang Ho, "When did you come? Did you find anything?" Wang Ho smiled, reached out his hand, and showed Li Mingtang a red crystal the size of a pigeon egg. "After separating with you, I walked around before I came over, and I have also found the thing." "Fantastic! Give me the thing, quickly." Seeing the red crystal, Li Mingtang looked overjoyed and watched the red crystal zealously. "Okay." Wang Ho walked to Li Mingtang slowly, quickly handing the crystal to Li Mingtang. Li Mingtang was so excited that he reached out to grab the crystal. Unexpectedly, Wang Ho flipped his hand and grabbed the crystal, punching Li Mingtang in the chest with his other hand. Li Mingtang was prepared as well. The moment when they made the move, Li Mingtang's body turned into gold. When Wang Ho hit his chest, the sound was metal hitting metal. "Wang Ho, you should know that you could never hurt my super diamond body," Li Mingtang exclaimed coldly. "Is that right?" Wang Ho snorted and suddenly threw a grenade. However, Wang Ho did not throw the grenade at Li Mingtang or the couple, but outside the castle. Hearing the strong explosion and airflow, Han Sen suddenly became pale. The nests on the ceiling almost exploded at the exact same time. All the green mini crystals hidden inside fell out like a dust storm. Very soon, the mini crystals came to them like locusts, not giving them any time to react.
Rot in hell.
Wang Ho regarded the three of them coldly, while the mini crystals bypassed his body as if he was not a target at all. Li Mingtang was shocked, but it was too late to run. All the green mini crystals stuck to his body, from which even his super diamond body could not defend him. Waving his hands like crazy, he did not manage to break many before he was covered in green mini crystals like a beekeeper covered in bees. After sticking to his body, the green mini crystals quickly turned into a red color. Obviously, They sucked out a large amount of blood from Li Mingtang's body. Li Mingtang issued a shrill scream, hitting the mini crystals on his own body like crazy, but to no avail. More and more mini crystals started to stick to him. Han Sen and Ji Yanran were both pale, thinking that it was probably the end of their lives. Since even Li Mingtang's super diamond body was not effective, it was less likely for them to survive. However, after the mini crystals came over, they also bypassed the couple and did not touch them at all, which made them both surprised and happy.
What?
Seeing the situation, Wang Ho regarded the couple, surprised. All right then, let me send you to hell myself. Wang Ho summoned his golden beast soul sword and walked directly to Han Sen. Han Sen was staring at the red crystal held in Wang Ho's left hand, not because he could tell something special about the crystal, but because the 9-life cat dependent was reacting to the red crystal. The red crystal looked very similar to the material of the 9-life cat pendant. Without more time for Han Sen to examine the crystal, Wang Ho had already walked up to him. Han Sen stood in front of Ji Yanran and shape-shifted into the Fairy Queen, running heresy mantra and overload at the same time to achieve his best. I did not kill you because I did not want Li Mingtang to find out about my real strength. You think you could beat me with your miserable abilities? Wang Ho snorted with contempt, stabbing his sword at Han Sen. Wang Ho's move was incredibly fast, and his sword reached Han Sen's throat in an instant. His heart thumping, Han Sen fixed his eyes on Wang Ho. Stepping forward instead of going back, he approached Wang Ho like a ghost. Even if Han Sen did everything he could, his fitness was still lacking compared to Wang Ho, who had already passed 100 in fitness. In addition, Wang Ho had a sacred blood sword from Second God's Sanctuary in his hand, while Han Sen had no proper weapon to use, which made it even harder for him to compete with Wang Ho. Han Sen's only chance to win was a close combat. Seeing Han Sen approaching himself, Wang Ho turned his sword around, changing from stabbing to cutting without so much as a pause. There was almost no way for Han Sen to defend himself. Swish! Han Sen was a bit slow at dodging the sword, and his neck was immediately marked with a cut. Blood started to flow. Although the injury was not fatal, it looked very scary. Watch out, Han Sen. It is Sprocket's sword. Do not let him strike again. Seeing Wang Ho's sword skills, Ji Yanran alarmed Han Sen, appalled. You are indeed someone from the JIS. So knowledgeable that you recognize Sprocket's sword. However, you know that too late. Wang Ho moved his left hand and summoned another beast soul sword. With one sword in each hand, he attacked Han Sen continuously. Han Sen had no way to block the incoming attacks. Wang Ho's sword skills were so incredible that the two swords looked like they were designed to be used together. One sword after another, Wang Ho did not leave any chance for Han Sen to even breathe. The strikes were so tight that they were like two sprockets moving forward with their teeth intertwined with no gaps at all. Just in a moment, Han Sen had been cut in several places already, bleeding heavily. Since Han Sen evolved to Second God's Sanctuary, he had never met such a strong enemy. There was no way for Han Sen to fight someone with a fitness over 100 and using Sprocket Sword. Summoning her dagger, Ji Yanran wanted to join the fight. Even if she had to sacrifice her life, she could not stand there and watch Han Sen getting killed. Don't come over. I got it, Han Sen exclaimed to stop Ji Yanran from coming, staring at the double swords of Wang Ho.
No rush.
You will both die anyways. Wang Ho's swords were getting faster and faster, his face cold. The kiting skills that Han Sen had put a lot of effort into eventually became handy. With excellent calculation, Han Sen managed to stall Wang Ho. Although he did not have the ability to fight back, Wang Ho's swords were never deadly to him either. Wang Ho couldn't help frowning slightly. Sprocket Sword was one of the best sword skills in making attacks. Once started, it could hardly be stopped by anyone. Since Wang Ho succeeded in practicing Sprocket Sword, even an evolver stronger than himself could hardly survive his double swords. It would be impressive for someone to block 100 or 200 strikes. However, Han Sen's fitness was obviously weaker than Wang Ho, but he had already blocked 300 strikes before Wang Ho could launch a fatal attack. In addition, Wang Ho was starting to feel that it was harder and harder for his blades to hurt Han's senator, although Han Sen was covered in injuries and blood all over. Wang Ho knew very well that those injuries were not deadly. What was even weirder was that Han Sen's injuries only bled a bit when he just got hurt, but the bleeding stopped very soon, and the injury started to shrink. Han Sen's eyes were emotionless like a well, reflecting all his enemies' moves. Sprocket Sword was indeed very impressive. There was hardly any pause between two strikes. Each strike was carefully designed that once the first strike was made, every strike that followed was unstoppable. Each strike was targeted at a vital part, not leaving the enemy any chance to fight back before killed. However, humans were not machines with sprockets, and the design of Sprocket Sword even gave Han Sen some extra opportunities. When it came to the design in martial arts, Han Sen had never met anyone stronger than Queen, who was a real master. Different from Queen, Wang Ho's sword skills were half fixed and half calculated, which made it more rigid than Queen's kiting skills. If Queen was a real master, then Wang Ho was simply someone with a good set of sword skills. No matter how good a set of sword skills was, it must be rigid with errors. When Han Sen was using kiting skills to dodge the attacks from Wang Ho, he was also continuously leading Wang Ho to make mistakes. Gradually, Han Sen came to understand the Sprocket Sword better, so it was harder and harder for Wang Ho to injure him. Wang Ho became upset. It was the first time that he had encountered an opponent like this one. It seemed that Han Sen's footwork was quite ordinary. However, no matter how fierce Wang Ho's sword skills were, it was hard for him to kill Han Sen. Han Sen's fitness was much worse than Wang Ho's, but Wang Ho started to feel that he was about to lose control. The figure of Han Sen became more and more unpredictable in Wang Ho's eyes, which consumed his confidence and made him feel that it was hard for him to kill Han Senator. Wang Ho was even worried that Han Sen might strike back.
Impossible.
Wang Ho roared, hitting Han Sen even harder with his swords. However, there was hardly effective. To the contrary, it made it even easier for Han Sen to cope with him. Anger will only cause more mistakes in Wang Ho's sword skills. All of a sudden, the situation seemed to be reversed. Wang Ho's sword skills were still as fierce as ever, but for some reason, it felt he was at a disadvantage. Ji Yanran was both surprised and happy. Wang Ho, who had practiced Sprocket Sword, which was one of the strongest attacking sword skills, failed to kill Han Sen after the first strike, and Han Sen even turned the situation around, which was something Ji Yanran had never heard of before. A fitness level over 100 and the well-known Sprocket Sword seemed to be completely useless in front of Senator Han Sen became more and more flexible, while Wang Ho became more and more suppressed. With a strong fitness and sharp sacred blood sword, Wang Ho could not put Han Sen down at all. Boom! With a punch from Han Sen, Wang Ho had to turn from offense to defense. The renowned Sprocket Sword was forced to be put on hold. Wang Ho's mind was almost shattered. He could not imagine that he would be forced to defend himself when using Sprocket Sword. Shocked and mad, he stepped back all of a sudden with the red crystal in his hand and said gloomily, "I will let you die ugly." As he spoke, Wang Ho put the red crystal on his forehead. Then, the red crystal suddenly lit up and shot a beam of red light. As if they were led by the red light, the green mini crystals floating in the air all turned toward Han Sen, as if they were commanded by some kind of invisible force. Han Sen was shocked. He had no idea that Wang Ho could actually use the red crystal to control other crystals. Even Han Sen himself did not know why the mini crystals did not approach Ji Yanran and him previously, so he could not think of any way to block the mini crystals. A sea of green mini crystals were already in front of Han Sen's face. Squeak! Suddenly, a low chirp came from Han Sen's pocket. The green mini crystals coming toward Han Sen suddenly froze as if time had stopped. After just a moment, the green mini crystals moved again. However, this time, their target was no longer Han Sen, but Wang Ho with the red crystal in his hand. Wang Ho suddenly became pale, urging the red crystal hastily, but to no avail. The green mini crystals were completely out of control and covered his body instantaneously. Ouch! Wang Ho screamed painfully and rolled around on the floor. However, he soon stopped moving. All of his blood was gone in a second, and his body was dried up. Wang Ho stared his eyes wide, full of despair. Squeak!
Han Sen's pocket sounded again.
The green mini crystals flew up and returned to their nests in a spiral, fabulous but spooky. Both Han Sen and Ji Yanran were stunned. Han Sen quickly opened his pocket and took out the green crystal unicorn beetle he put there. The unicorn beetle was the same way, lying on Han Sen's hand languidly. It looked as useless as ever, but both Han Sen and Ji Yanran were amazed by it at this point. Without a doubt, the reason that the green mini crystals got rid of Wang Ho's control and sucked him dry was completely this unicorn beetle. Han Sen was quite certain that he and Ji Yanran also needed to thank the unicorn beetle for keeping the green mini crystals away from them earlier. What is this? Han Sen looked at the unicorn beetle in his hand, shocked. Ji Yanran only shook her head. She had never heard of such a thing. It seemed that only crystallizers could control crystals, while crystallizers did not appear in the form of any creatures, let alone a unicorn beetle. However, if this unicorn beetle was not a crystallizer, how could it have controlled all those crystals? Han Sen put the unicorn beetle back to his pocket carefully. No matter what, Han Sen felt he had got himself a treasure. With the unicorn beetle near him, it would be much safer for him to enter any crystallizer ruin. After putting away the unicorn beetle, Han Sen walked to the body of Wang Ho and picked up the red crystal. Taking the red crystal in his hand, the 9-life cat pendant reacted even stronger. However, after Han Sen put the red crystal next to the 9-life cat pendant, nothing strange happened. There is no doubt that this piece of crystal is making the 9-life cat pendant react. But why is that? Han Sen gave it some thought and then put the red crystal on his forehead like Wang Ho did. All of a sudden, Han Sen felt a warm stream flowed into his brain. It felt somewhat like when he used the brain crystal, but it was different in that he did not feel the electric shock, just the warmth. This is strange. How did Wang Ho use this piece of crystal to control other crystals? Han Sen did not find a method to use the red crystal. When Han Sen was in doubt, he suddenly felt the crystal was melting in his hand. Shocked, Han Sen wanted to remove the crystal from his forehead, but the crystal had already turned into liquid, which he could no longer catch. Instantly, the red liquid infiltrated Han Sen's brain, making it hotter and hotter. White vapor started to rise from Han Sen's hair. However, heat like that did not make Han Sen feel uncomfortable. To the contrary, Han Sen felt his brain was never so clear. The effect was even better than when he just used a brain crystal. Very soon, the heat in his brain gradually disappeared. Han Sen did not feel anything special other than a clearer brain. After the crystal was absorbed, the 9-life cat pendant was no longer hot and became an ordinary stone again. Are you okay?
Ji Yanran tatsked Han Senes forehead, worried. I'm fine.
This thing is similar to the brain crystals. How on earth did Wang Ho use it to control the other crystals?
Han Sen asked, putssled.
Both Li Mingtang and Wang Ho are dead, so I'm afraid no one knows the truth anymore. Ji Yanran looked at the bodies of Li Mingtang and Wang Ho again. The two persons who were elite of the alliance died in this ruin of crystallizer royalty for a strange reason. Han Sen nodded, but did not think so himself. Going through the stuff left behind by Li Mingtang and Wang Ho, Han Sen saw the access card with the 9-life cat image in Wang Ho's card holder as well. To his surprise, Han Sen did not find a similar access card in Li Mingtang's belongings. Han Sen went through other stuff without finding anything else of value. Han Sen returned everything to its original place, looked inside the castle, but did not go deeper. With this unicorn beetle, we should be able to exit the ruin safely and look for other people trapped here still. Han Sen took Ji Yanran's hand and went back, not wanting to raid the treasure at all. It was mainly because everything would be taken by the Alliance once Han Sen returned to Daphne. There was no way he could cheat the scan. What worried Han Sen the most was whether the unicorn beetle would be found. Carrying the unicorn beetle, Han Sen found the other crystals did not dare to approach them at all. The Rubik's Cube, simulating crystals, and parasite crystals would all freeze whenever the unicorn beetle approached. Nothing would attack them proactively. Although Ji Yanran and Han Sen did not recognize the paths, they would not run into any danger with the unicorn beetle. After more than half a day, the two of them eventually met other people who had entered the ruin, including Qin Shoshan. After reuniting, the group of people found the entrance where they came from, thanks to the judgment of a professor. After they came out, they did not run into the simulating crystals again and returned to Daphne smoothly. The two crystals that Han Sen took back did not escape the scan, but to Han Sen's joy, the unicorn beetle was not discovered. Because of the huge accident during the exploration of this crystallizer ruin, Daphne was asked to go back immediately. It was yet to be determined whether they would be punished. Fortunately, the two advanced crystals that Han Sen brought back were submitted to the Alliance by Ji Yanran, which excused her from potential sanction. Being a cookhouse soldier, Han Sen was too unimportant to be liable, so he was fine as well. Korn, come over here. Sitting in his bed, Han Sen was reading a book when he found the uniform beetle was fighting it out with a table leg, trying to knock it over with its horn. Unfortunately, it was so weak that it could not shake the table at all. Han Sen exclaimed at it, but the unicorn beetle did not understand him, still working hard to fight the table. Come back. Although Han Sen knew the unicorn beetle could not understand him, he was too lazy to get out of bed, so he shouted at the beetle again. The unicorn beetle did not mind him. However, its body was suddenly captured by something and started to float toward Han Sen. Ah! Han Sen looked at the unicorn beetle in surprise. As he changed his thoughts, the unicorn beetle suddenly lost the support and fell from the air. Han Sen was completely shocked. He tried to focus his mind again on the unicorn beetle, and very soon, it floated again, flying wobbly toward him. Han Sen caught the unicorn beetle with his hand and felt overjoyed. Then he tried to focus his attention on other smaller objects like cups. Indeed, it turned out he could move some smaller objects with his mind. He could make a cup within a range of about 6 feet float. If the object was more far away, it would be beyond his power. Also, he could not lift anything heavy with his mind. Initially, Han Sen was very excited. Later, however, he discovered that this ability was almost useless. The distance requirement was stringent, and the actual force he could use was too weak. It was almost impossible to be used in a fight. The red crystal seemed to have given my brain some revolutionary development. Now I could even use my mind to move things. However, it is still so weak that it is not very useful. Han Sen soon lost interest in his newly gained ability. However, another benefit that the red crystal brought him made Han Sen jump with joy. When Han Sen started to learn the ancient language again after he came back, he found his memory and understanding much better and his progress much faster. Because of the accident in the last mission, everyone on Daphne was forbidden to enter God's sanctuary or use the Skynet. Han Sen had to learn the ancient language all the time. Because his brain had been enhanced, he had made tremendous progress in understanding the ancient language. Although he was still unable to understand the majority of Dongxian Sutra, Han Sen now understood a part that was easier to read. This part was a technique that represented a kind of footwork. Simply by going forward, backward, left, right, and sideways, one could produce endless interesting combinations. It showed how the Tao produced one. One produced two produced three, and three produced all things. In addition, from Han Sen's perspective, this technique written in Dongxian Sutra was somewhat similar to the kiting skills of Queen. Han Sen only learned some superficial techniques from Queen and did not learn it systematically. However, after reading this part in Dongxian Sutra, Han Sen was thrilled because he had some epiphanies that he had never imagined before. The more he read, the more fascinating he found Dongxian Sutra. Only such a small technique represented plenty knowledge, which made Han Sen look forward to reading the main part of the Dongxian Sutra even more. Han Sen had more and more notes as he read. However, it was a bit boring for him to practice alone. Han Sen decided to fight someone else to test whether what he was thinking was correct. However, because of the ban on Daphne, there was no way he could use the Skynet. Naturally, he could not log into the Gladiator platform. There was, however, another way. Han Sen used the holographic trainer to connect to the virtual camp of the military, which allowed him to spar with other soldiers. Han Sen did not bother to think of other names, and still used the ID name a soldier on warship in the virtual camp. Although Han Sen's rank was major, he was still a newbie in the virtual camp and had to gain experience from fighting to upgrade. Han Sen chose a random match and was soon matched with a captain. Han Sen checked his opponent out and found it was a tall woman who had used the face blur function. Her ID was Ms. Perfume. In the same time, in the teleport station of Planet Roca, Qin Xian was also using the holographic trainer to log into the virtual camp, and her ID name was Ms. Perfume. Checking the ID name of her opponent, Qin Xian was surprised because the name became quite famous among soldiers after the video of 7 Kill was released. However, she looked at the record of her opponent and found he was a newbie with no win and no loss, so she thought the name should just be a coincidence. Han Sen did not imagine that he would be matched with Qin Xian, and Qin Xian would never expect to be paired with Han Senator. The two old friends went into the contest without knowing anything. Qin Xian had great luck, at least much better than Han Senator. After she evolved to Second God Sanctuary, she was randomly assigned to a large shelter that had already been occupied by humans. There were millions of humans in the shelter, among which many were strong evolvers. There were also lots of people working for the special squad, with many talents as well. After Qin Xian arrived, she gained a large supply of meat and had already filled her ordinary, primitive, and mutant geno points. With some sacred geno points gained, she had managed to break 100 in fitness after 2 years, definitely one of the top evolvers. Seeing that her opponent was just a newbie, Qin Xian did not pay much attention to him. She thought she should be able to finish up pretty fast. However, after the fight began, it was completely unexpected for her. She turned from calm to angry to sullen, almost crying in the end. Qin Xian was someone who had seen great talents of various types. However, it was the first time she had encountered such an opponent. A soldier on warship did not attack at all, dodging her attacks all the time. However, when she had used all she got, she still failed to hit her opponent. In addition, to her dismay, she was forced into a dead end by her opponent without her noticing. Obviously, her opponent could have ended the fight with one move, but he did not choose to do that. His toying with her was simply an insult to Qin Xian. "You will regret this." Qin Xian bit her lips, upset. She then used atomic fission and the hyper-geno art called Thunder Knife that she had newly learned as an evolver. Although its name was Thunder Knife, it was not a knife skill, but a hyper-geno art that could change the body cells on one's hands, especially the edge of one's hands, making it as sharp as a blade, crushing everything in its way. Of course, in the virtual camp, this feature could not be embodied fully. However, Thunder Knife could also enhance one's speed greatly, which was rather useful. Her hands slashing like thunder, Qin Xian was incredibly fast, putting great pressure on Han Sen. Crack! Han Sen did not dodge in time and was hit on his shoulder. His health value suddenly went down by 64%, which showed how powerful Qin Xian's strike was. Although it was not a vital part that was injured, Han Sen still lost more than half of his health in one strike. Feeling slightly excited, Han Sen knew it was only in front of a powerful opponent that he could truly test whether what he had learned was useful. Therefore, the stronger his opponent, the happier he would be. However, his health could no longer pull him through a second strike. Han Sen became more careful and started to integrate what he had learned from Dongxian Sutra to his footwork and movements. In the beginning, he was somewhat green. When Qin Xian launched fast attacks using Thunder Knife at him, he was trapped in risky situations multiple times. However, as Han Sen gradually put what he had learned into use, he was surprised to know all the possibilities there were. It was as if he had pushed open the gates to the new world, seeing lots of things that he had never imagined before. Han Sen was more and more immersed in his new discovery. In the beginning, he felt his opponent Ms. Perfume brought him a lot of pressure. But gradually, Han Sen could no longer feel the pressure and became fully committed to mastering the technique mentioned in Dongxian Sutra. His opponent was not in his eyes. From that moment on, Han Sen's opponent was no longer Ms. Perfume, but his yearning for the new world. In the beginning, Qin Xian was very mad, wanting to use whatever she got to beat this damned opponent. However, gradually her anger became surprise and then respect and astonishment. Qin Xian found about one fact. Judging from the speed of her opponent, his fitness should be lower than hers. Or, he must have lowered his fitness on purpose to fight her. Even so, her opponent's incredible footwork still left no hope for Qin Xian to beat him because of the large gap between the two of them. Qin Xian had once had this feeling before against some true masters, so she naturally thought that her opponent was not an ordinary newbie, but some military mogul in disguise. Therefore, Qin Xian no longer had the anger, but wanted to learn something from her opponent, observing the footwork and skills of her opponent closely. As she observed, Han Sen became more and more surprised. I wonder who this mogul is. His footwork is almost comparable to Heavenly Go, but it is also somewhat different. This is so amazing. When is this footwork developed? Is it a new one or some ancient legacy? Han Sen had no idea that Qin Xian thought he was some military mogul playing with her. Continuing to figure out the Dongxian Sutra, Han Sen was very inspired. With his new knowledge, his footwork was now elevated from the level of imitating Queen, and he was getting better and better at it. As Han Sen was excited, he found his opponent had stopped attacking. Han Sen looked at her, puzzled, not understanding why she would pause. "May I ask who you are, Chief?" Qin Xian saluted to him and asked respectfully. Han Sen's footwork was overwhelming to Qin Xian, so she thought he must be a military mogul. "I am no chief, just a soldier," Han Sen replied directly. There was no way Qin Xian would believe him, because a soldier could never have such footwork. She had only seen the ability to put incredible pressure on the opponent just using footwork in a couple of masters. It was not a state that one could achieve with just some hyper-geno arts. One must have enough cultivation in martial arts to be so impressive. Han Sen was not that cultivated in martial arts. However, given how amazing Dongxian Sutra was, he was able to put such pressure on Qin Xian just by integrating some of the techniques into his footwork, leading her to believe that he was a military mogul in disguise. Since her opponent did not want to admit it, Qin Xian did not want to force it either. However, she was still fully convinced that Han Sen was a military mogul. Watching Han Sen, she asked, "Comrade, what is the name of your footwork? Could you teach it to others? You want to learn?" Han Sen was surprised by the request of this female soldier named Miss Perfume. "Yes." Qin Xian nodded. "Obviously, I could teach you that. But it is not a hyper-geno art that belongs to the military, so I could not teach for free." Han Sen thought about it and said. He had only learned a part of it himself so far. Practicing alone, he might not be able to tell his own flaws, just like a chess player could not be as objective as an observer. If this Miss Perfume was willing to pay the price, Han Sen did not mind teaching her something. It would be nice to experiment on her anyway. Of course, Han Sen would not tell her the complete techniques. "Name your price, comrade." "I will pay as long as I can afford it," Qin Xian said hastily. She knew that money could not buy the footwork of her opponent. "Let's make an agreement first. I can only teach you some parts of the skill. It is up to you how much you could master." Since his opponent was sincere, Han Sen did not want to lie to her and put the truth forward. "Of course, I understand that." Because of the way Han Sen said it, Qin Xian was even more convinced that he was a military mogul. It was okay for him to instruct her once in a while, but he definitely had no time to be her personal tutor. "All right, if you want to learn, one class is half an hour. I will teach, and you shall listen. No question asked. The interval between classes is up to me. As for the fee..."
Han Sen hesitated.
Money was out of the question. His accounts and identity would easily be exposed. Staying on Daphne right now, he could not make any face-to-face transactions either. "Let's trade martial art with martial art. For the first class, you could give me the tutorial of the hand skills you just used. We will talk about future classes later. What do you think?" Han Sen suggested to Qin Xian, feeling he was asking a lot. Her hand skills were not anything ordinary. By teaching her half an hour, he was asking for a hyper-geno art that was probably an S-class art designed for evolvers. This price was obviously very high. "Okay," Qin Xian agreed with no hesitation.